Americans for Prosperity North Dakota proudly supported important policy improvements that broke barriers for all North Dakotans this legislative session. From tackling unnecessary and burdensome occupational licensing standards to fighting for tax relief, AFP is proud to have played a part in improving the lives of North Dakotans this year. Join AFP today by visiting www.afpnd.org. This advertisement was paid for by Americans for Prosperity. Welcome to the Plain Talk Podcast. My name is Rob Port, and I am your host. A little bit later in the show, we're going to be talking with Ron Ness from the North Dakota Petroleum Council. The Associated Press had a big national feature story about the flaring issue in North Dakota. That's been an issue in the past in the state, and it's become an issue again because some of the regulations that were reached by the state about 5 years ago in cooperation with the oil and gas industry, well, they're not being met. And I think there's important questions to ask about why they're not being met and how we can get to a point where they are being met without doing serious harm to, well, our state's government and our state's economy. You got to remember, this is happening in the context where about half, in fact, more than half in recent years, of all of the revenues that the state of North Dakota collects are direct revenues from the oil and gas industry. That's not even counting the secondary revenues that are plowed into state coffers through the sales tax, the income tax, et cetera, et cetera. I'm talking about just direct taxes on oil and gas activity, more than half of the state's revenue. So if we reach a point where we're going to try to curb oil activity in order to, reduce flaring, well, you better be ready for some budget cuts because that's reality. But before we get to that interview, should we talk about Mount Everest for a minute? I was actually surprised to read a recent New York Times article about climbers standing in line to get to the top of Mount Everest. Now, to me, that just seems like a very incongruous thing. I mean, you imagine summiting Mount Everest as being this sort of culmination of like a lifetime dream, and you get to the top and there's nobody else around and the wind is howling and it's very desolate and very cold, and you're looking out at, from literally the top of the world. And you're looking out over everything around you. I don't think what you imagine is that there's a line behind you like you're at Disneyland and everybody's waiting to get on Space Mountain. But that seems to be what's happening. Climbers were pushing and shoving to take selfies, the New York Times reported recently. The flat part of the summit, which he estimated, and this article was about a climber who made the summit recently, the flat part of the summit, which he estimated was about the size of 2 ping pong tables, was packed with 15 or 20 people. To get up there, he had to wait 2 hours in a line, chest to chest, one puffy jacket after the next, on an icy, rocky ridge with a several 1,000-foot drop. Now, things have gotten so bad at the summit of Mount Everest that people are literally dying because it's overcrowded, right? I mean, can you imagine you're up on these precarious ledges, these tiny places? I mean, climbing Mount Everest is an inherently dangerous thing without the crowding. You add in the fact that there's all these other people. They have varying levels of climbing skills. There's all sorts of problems. I would encourage you to go find this article, track down this article in the New York Times and read it, because it's just eye-opening. 11 people have died so far this climbing season. Now, to me, I look at that and I wonder, why are people still climbing Mount Everest? Why are people still doing this? It's not that much of an accomplishment anymore. I mean, it is an accomplishment. I mean, it's still a difficult thing to do, and it's still a very expensive thing to do. And if you do it, I guess that's an achievement of sorts, but there's nothing unique about it. Lots of people are doing it every year. In fact, more than one person a day last year. According to the Himalayan database, 802 people reached the peak of Mount Everest in 2018 alone. I wrote in a print column that's up today that we're maybe not that far removed from a gift shop and free Wi-Fi to help with those top-of-the-world selfies for Instagram. Now, one facet, and I'm going to come to my point here because I'm going to make a larger point about societal narcissism and where it's led us with social media. One part of the Times article that was particularly chilling, right? I mean, because it's one thing to think of, it's kind of gross to think of all the garbage and all the people that are trying to climb Mount Everest and the people who are dying doing this and it's overcrowded and everything else. I mean, that's all bad enough. But the Times article describes Everest tourists ignoring people along the trail who are injured or dying, literally stepping over them at times to focus on their own quest to reach the top. Now, I read that, and this may seem like an odd connection to make, but I read that, and I immediately thought of Beto O'Rourke, the Democratic presidential candidate, live streaming his dental visit, of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez live streaming herself making macaroni and cheese. These are politicians, and yet for some reason they think, and they're right to a degree because millions of people do care about their mundane day-to-day activities. We live in a me era. See me get my teeth cleaned. See me make mac and cheese. See me ignore the suffering of other human beings so I can post on Instagram that I was the 533rd person to climb Mount Everest this year. Now, the internet has made a lot of wonderful things possible. It made my career possible. I started writing on the internet. Started doing podcasts way back when. Don't try to find them. They're terrible. Started writing a blog. Those early posts are terrible too if you find them. And I turned a career out of it. I was able to break into the world of journalism, break into the world of political commentary through the internet. Were it not for the internet, I wouldn't be around. I wouldn't be able to do what I do today. But here's the thing, is that the internet has also made us stars of our own reality TV shows, and I'm wondering what that's doing to us. I think a lot of people feel drawn to feed an always hungry content monster. We feel drawn to update our Facebook statuses, update our Twitter accounts, update our Snap stories, all these different things that we're doing, feed it with content about ourselves. And then we're worried that if we don't have interesting things going on in our lives, maybe we'll just make them up. We become so desperate. We post things about our lives that maybe we really shouldn't be sharing publicly, or we just flat out make things up and misrepresent. We treat everything as though it were special until nothing seems special. We become so desperate for the dopamine rush of likes and retweets, our priorities become strange. I'm reminded some years ago I wrote a column about a man in Fargo. He had been targeted by a social media mob because he'd been taking some pictures near a busy public school in Fargo. Facebook vigilantes had concluded that he was some sort of a creep, that he was there, like taking pictures of children or taking pictures of people in their bathing suits. And it went nuts. It went viral. It got local media coverage. Thousands of people on Facebook posting this guy's picture, posting ugly things about this man and what they imagined his intentions to be. People threatening him with physical violence. The thing, though, is that the first person to contact law enforcement was the man himself. And he did so because he was terrified. I know this because I interviewed him, and I ended up writing a column about it, which you can see linked in today's column. Thousands in the Fargo-Moorhead region were outraged enough to post insults and threats aimed at this man. None of them called the cops. These people, supposedly motivated by a threat in their community, valued the thrill of social media over actually doing something responsible about the imagined threat. This is where we are as a society. It's not a good place. It's the sort of thing that might make you step over somebody who's dying on a trail up a mountain because you want to get a selfie at the top of the mountain. It's not a good thing, folks. My interview with Ron Ness up next. This episode of the Plain Talk Podcast is brought to you by Energy of North Dakota. Oil and natural gas from North Dakota strengthens all of America. And through our abundance of talents, innovations, and technologies, energy responsibly produced here translates to worldwide economic stability. With producers and our communities working together, we're securing a sustainable future that generation after generation can build on. It's all happening right now with Energy of North Dakota. Learn more at energyofnorthdakota.com. Ron Ness joins me now. Ron is the president of the North Dakota Petroleum Council. That is an organization that advocates for and represents the oil industry in our state, the oil and gas industry. Now, recently, the Associated Press had a headline from North Dakota that went national. In fact, I'm reading an iteration of it here in the Los Angeles Times. The headline was, North Dakota oil producers are wasting billions of cubic feet of natural gas. Now, the flaring issue isn't unusual in North Dakota. I think it's probably, and maybe Ron would agree with me, it's something that it's a challenge we've struggled with since the beginning, I guess, of what people think of as the Bakken oil boom. It's always been a struggle in North Dakota, and I'm assuming that a lot of it has to do with infrastructure. And in fact, that gets mentioned in the Associated Press lead to the story, which I'm going to read now. I quote, North Dakota oil drillers are falling far short of the state's goals to limit the burning of excess natural gas at wellheads 5 years after the state adopted rules to reduce the wasteful and environmentally harmful practice. The industry has spent billions of dollars on infrastructure, but is at least 2 years from catching up, and regulators are projecting the state's increasing gas production will still outstrip that new capacity. Ron, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Rob, and thanks for the opportunity to chat about this today. And one part of that is extremely accurate, that this has been an ongoing challenge in North Dakota, and part of that is that the Bakken gas is extremely liquid rich, and really from the onset in 2007, it's unlike anything that we had experienced in North Dakota in terms of the liquid qualities of that gas. So a traditional gas plant didn't work. And then, of course, from there, you have to begin to build infrastructure from ground zero. And we have spent almost $18 billion now over the past decade in just natural gas infrastructure. And, of course, this is an oil play. This is associated natural gas. It's not just a gas field like you would see in the Marcellus Shale or in some places like around Dallas, Texas. So the gas is a percentage of the stream of the oil, but certainly it is a valuable aspect of the component of that, basically that oil well. But it has been a struggle, and we have attracted the investment to be able to manage the gas. But these are major investments. As you tallied them up to $18 billion, you can think about the planning it takes. And what is currently happening in the Bakken is that we are continually outpacing our expectations. So there is an oil producer out there that drills a well. He contracts his gas to a midstream company, which would be like the person you buy your electricity or your natural gas from, and they own and operate the infrastructure to process that gas, get that gas to growing markets, of which in North Dakota it's a challenge. Of course, you can't store natural gas like you could store oil. So as you produce an oil well, you're going to produce this natural gas, and for safety reasons, the safest thing you can do is you can flare that gas versus venting it, which is an environmental impact. You flare the gas and basically destruct that to the extent possible of the emissions. So the challenge has been getting the infrastructure right-sized. And to some extent to you and I, it's like you're going to have Thanksgiving at your house, and you're going to put a refrigerator in your house. Are you going to build a refrigerator big enough for all of the food that you need for Thanksgiving Day? Or are you going to build it big enough, like the utility wants to, for the next 30 years? And what's been happening in North Dakota, we make the plans for the long-term investments, but our productivity of these individual Bakken wells is increasing so rapidly that we keep outpacing and outsizing even the pipelines that we build to each of these well pads to go get the gas. Most of the wells in North Dakota are now connected. The challenge is that the pipes that they're connected to the processing plants, the pipes are undersized. So you got to go in and you got to put new pipelines in, which we're doing. But then you've got to build these natural gas processing facilities, which takes years. These are $250 to $400 million facilities, and they take 2 or 3 years. So the plans that we made in 2012 and 13 for the productivity, when things ramped up back again in 2015 and the production increased, we outsized that capacity. We're going to have under construction today is $4 billion worth of gas plants. We are going to have those coming online at the end of this year into next year. That should catch us up. Now, the challenge posed to that midstream industry in being pressed by the producers and pressed by the state, pressed by everybody involved, because nobody wants to see, gas flaring or in this case, natural gas capture not meeting the goals. you've got to attract that investment. Well, you don't attract that investment by shutting off the wells in order to be able to show you the volumes you need to build to. So you got to be able to produce these wells, see what they're going to build to, so you know, and you can plan beyond Thanksgiving Day, not just the initial 30 days of that well. These wells come on big and then they decline for a very, very long period of time. And you want to build these pipelines the right size, but you got to have more processing capacity. So we got to attract that next tier of investment now for years 2, 3, and 4, because we're going to catch up this year. But then I think we're going to quickly, if continued performance of these wells needs to increase, we're going to quickly, maybe in the next 18 months, we're going to outpace what we have again. So now you got to work on export capacity. You got to work on value-added commodities in the state, like fertilizer, plastics, those things.
One quick question before we go any further. It says that our goal, we are to be at 10% by next year, 10% flaring by next year, by 2020, under the current standards, which we're not meeting, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. The Associated Press reports, I quote, "The national average for flaring is less than 1%. Now, those of us who don't work in the oil and gas industry, we see those two numbers. Our goal that we're not currently meeting is 10% by next year. The national average is less than 1%. That seems really out of whack. Why is North Dakota so much higher flaring than the rest of the country?
Well, most of the gas, of course, is produced in gas fields. So if you're in Pennsylvania or West Virginia, any of those major gas-producing areas where most of the natural gas is processed, you're not going to produce those wells because they're 100% gas wells. That's the value stream. So in North Dakota, you're looking at a $50 or $60 barrel of oil and probably $1.80 or less cents of an equivalent MCF of gas that comes out with that barrel of oil. So your economics in North Dakota, the oil is what you're chasing. The gas is an associated gas. So you don't want to shut down the economics of that well because the economics are in the oil. If you did that in North Dakota, of course, then, you know, the midstream industry would say, well, why are we going to invest more here? And of course, everybody wants the oil production to continue, the jobs to continue. So we've got to build the infrastructure and continue to invest in that infrastructure. And of course, we have a long, hard winter here, which they don't have in other parts of the country like Texas and other places. So it slows and delays our ability to build these plants along with our workforce challenges. But primarily the reason is because in gas fields, the gas is what you're after. You're not going to flare primarily. In
North Dakota, gas is a byproduct, basically, of oil exploration. It's a side effect, and so it's the economics of it are a little bit different. That explains that. 5 years ago, we implemented our current plan for flaring, and I remember that debate. The oil industry was very much a part of that debate, and a part of I don't want to say part of writing it. The North Dakota Industrial Commission wrote the flaring rules, but the industry had a lot of input on it. And I think ultimately when the plan came out, the industry was supportive of it. But now we're not hitting that plan. And I think you kind of already answered this, that maybe it's just a product of wells producing more than we expected. But why aren't we hitting these goals that the industry was supportive of 5 years ago?
Well, the industry was supportive of those goals, and as you said, at the time, Governor Dalrymple came to us and said, you figure this out or I will, and you won't like that. And we were probably tougher and more stringent upon ourselves than any regulatory agency would have been. And then, of course, the Industrial Commission took that and they kind of upped the ante beyond that. But at that time, with the production that we had, we felt that the investments were going to be coming online in order to meet that. Now, of course, then you hit the downturn and some investments stopped, which delayed some of this. But ultimately, what you've seen really since 2015 and 16 now is just an amazing ramp up of productivity per well. And I'm going to guess somewhere in the 20 to 25% more gas on any individual well. Of course, when you accumulate that over the entire Bakken, you've seen the gas production now grow to almost 2.8 BCF a day, which is just a huge number. And at that time, we were looking at maybe 1.4 BCF a day. So that's a billion cubic feet of gas, which is a lot of gas not in comparison to what they make in the other gas-producing states. I think we're probably still 14th or 15th in total gas production, second in oil, of course. But what we've seen is that productivity per well just skyrocket, and we got to basically continue to build that infrastructure. And, you can say we're not hitting the gas capture targets. We're not hitting the raw number, but essentially we are hitting the individual operator by operator number because of some variances that are built in for allowing construction, allowing new wells coming on, like on that Thanksgiving Day, to realize those wells are going to decline. So you get a grace period there. So as you factor those back in on an operator by operator basis, those operators, if they don't meet it, their production is going to be restricted. So that's really the trigger to watch for. So, may not be meeting the gross number as an industry, but the net number, which is really the regulatory number. We are typically meeting that on an individual operator by operator basis. But we gotta continue to invest. We got to continue to push. And that midstream industry needs to know they have the support of the oil producer who's contracted their gas to them to be bold enough to continue to put those billions of dollars here. And you got to know the gas is going to be here for the long term, because you don't put billions of dollars down for 1 to 5 years. These are utility type companies. They invest for the long term, and then of course you're seeing some pipelines being built out of the region and moving gas into other parts of the country. But there's also a lot of pressure on that, because there's a lot of natural gas elsewhere in the country as well.
Well, it's a good thing. I mean, what it means is we have a lot of a resource. I mean, all those billions of dollars that's already been invested and the billions of dollars that will be invested is a sign that we have decades and decades worth of a resource here that North Dakota can produce and export, and that's going to be beneficial to our state, and that's all wonderful. A lot of this
Rob,
sorry,
I just want to I want to expand on that, because this is a challenge. We wake up, we face it every day, but there is a huge opportunity here. There is an opportunity here to create a chemical industry, which can become another component of an industry in North Dakota. We can make fertilizer for our agriculture industry. We can make plastics for the world. When you have a surplus resource, that will attract that investment. That's the only way you attract that type of investment, and we have that. And we've got to build our way out of this, just like we built our way out of the housing crunch for apartments and hotels in Williston and Watford City and Dickinson. At that point, should we have stopped everything, or do you continue to invest and attract the better investments? And that's what we did there. And I firmly believe we've got to continue to invest our way out of this.
I agree. Now, politically, I mean, some of these things are just things beyond our control. I mean, the oil and gas markets are up and down. When there's what you mentioned, part of what slowed it down is, we had a downturn in oil for a while. And so that, sort of maybe scared away some investment in gas capture and processing capacity for a while. But beyond those things that we can't control, just sort of the realities of the marketplace and the weather, those things are what they are. Politically speaking, are things like, and I'm looking across the landscape and I'm seeing, the fight over the Dakota Access Pipeline. I mean, we're talking about an oil pipeline, we're talking about gas pipelines here, but still, there is a lot of political hostility out there towards building any sort of infrastructure, refineries, pipelines, what have you, that benefits the oil and gas industry. Enbridge is taking it on the chin over Line 3 over in Minnesota, which is, they're just trying to replace an old pipeline. So that's the political atmosphere. Does that scare away investment? I mean, does that create a situation where it's harder to get people to say, yes, I'm going to plop down $1 billion to help build a new gas plant in North Dakota?
Well, I think the biggest risk in North Dakota for the midstream industry to build new gas plants was really the long-term productivity of the Bakken. And, they got spooked when the downturn happened in 2014. How will the basin respond? Will production grow again? And, what we have proven through that downturn is we got better. And I just had somebody calculate the number for me, Rob. Over the past 2 years, natural gas production in North Dakota has increased 60%. 60.
Wow.
That's a big number from where we thought we were already, cruising along, producing a lot of gas. So that tells you what's going on. Now that is going to increase attract investment. I will guarantee you there's economic opportunity there that will keep those billions of dollars coming. And the other thing is, let's look at the incredible job opportunities that these gas plants are creating out there. The number of workers that we need in these gas plants, the power process unit operators, the degrees at BSC, those students, a 2-year degree, they're probably starting somewhere around $80,000 a year, and we're going to need a boatload of them. And so I hope parents and others are listening out there. If you can imagine a 2-year degree at Bismarck State College starting at around $80,000, some of these companies are a week on, week off type of job. So this is a new industry, and amongst itself, it's fits right in with the ethanol industry and the lignite power process plants because it's the same skill set. So, but we got to keep building them, and that gas production increasing is something we all want to see. So, in order to see that happen, we got to keep investing. And I think, from a standpoint of North Dakota political and leaders, you got to understand that the significant it means to us in the long term to have these resources built here, as opposed to just shutting things down and say, no, run to Texas and then come back here when the gas supply drops. That's not the way to build a better economy like we're doing here in North Dakota.
Well, we're in a situation too where about half of all of the tax revenues at the state, about half of all the revenues that the state of North Dakota comes from the oil and gas industry. I'm not sure the politicians are in a position to where even if they wanted to start saying, hey, we got to shut some oil production down, frankly, I don't know if we could afford it. And that's a whole nother debate about certain maybe budgeting and spending decisions that have been made that are maybe beyond the scope of this conversation. Last question. Obviously, a headline like this is going to have people saying we should do something on flaring. There should be some sort of a regulatory change or a policy change. What, if anything, does that look like from the industry's perspective?
Well, number one, for me, my task today is to, put this back on the top of the discussion topic list and, press upon the operators and the midstream companies to ensure that a lot of times some of these projects don't get announced publicly, but make sure that we've got more projects coming online. I do think that the $4 billion you're seeing invested right now is going to catch us up. But I think as the Pipeline Authority data has continued to show, if this technology continues to improve, which we hope it will and we think it will, that we need more plants. So as soon as those workers finish with one plant, let's not send them anywhere. Let's get them going on the version 4 of these, expansion 4 of each of these plants. And to the credit, you've seen those expansions coming. It just takes time. And there are some major lines coming on, but if we could just shut the gas off and produce the oil, or shut the gas off and still attract the investment, I think we'd all be all for that. But we got to fight our way through this thing, just like we've done with everything else in the world. And we've got technologies out there that are used to remotely capture some of this gas, and we've had people from all over the world here. We had Department of Energy send Iraqi oil officials here to look at how we've addressed flaring in terms of remote capture, and is it possible to put it on the electric utilities line? Is it can you drop the liquids out of it and use it for LNG or CNG? So one thing about North Dakota's regulatory process, we monitor things very closely. They're very public. Not the case in all other states. I would, even on that 1% number, I would challenge that. In some places of the country, they really don't monitor and track natural gas capture the way we do here, and that's it's a good thing for the information to be out there in public, and it puts the pressure back on the industry get the job done.
Well, it really is. I think you're right. I think it is a good thing. The information's out there. Does it sometimes make everything a little trickier? Yeah. You know what? Democracy can be messy sometimes, and it can be a real headache. But generally, I think you're right. I think North Dakota does it the right way. Ron, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob.
That's it for today's podcast. Remember, new episodes come out Monday through Friday, usually right away in the morning. I should say I decided to take some vacation next week, the first week of June. So there won't be any podcasts updating that week, but the week after we'll be back to business as normal. Of course, Say Anything blog will be quiet. No regular columns for me. I got some vacation time built up, and you know what? I'm going to take it because that's the sort of thing that makes you a happier, more productive person. If you have time off, you should take it too. If you ever have any feedback on the show, you should email me, rob@sayanythingblog.com. You can follow me on social media. Just search me out on Facebook or Twitter. I'm pretty easy to find. Say Anything blog has Facebook and Twitter accounts as well. Check that out. If you want to send in questions for our weekly guests, Senator Kevin Cramer, Congressman Kelly Armstrong, you can certainly do that, rob@sayanythingblog.com. And thanks for listening. I appreciate it. We'll talk again.